Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, Alberta Wheat Commission, and C&M Seeds.
Bernard Tobin here at the Southwest Ag Conference here at Ridgetown College, joined today by Jim Orson. Now, Jim is a research agronomist from NIAB in Cambridge, England. Tell us a little bit about NIAB.
Well, NIAB is an organisation that's existed for about 100 years and look at very basic plant breeding. There's some GM involved with some of that as well, but not in wheat. And we have an arm which provides information for farmers, right. And the farmers subscribe to us, and we produce information for them on a regular basis. Yeah.
So I wanted to say welcome to Ontario.
It's wonderful to be here.
You come on over, and you just spoke to some folks here at SWAC and talked about the differences between UK, New Zealand, and Ontario. And you give us some interesting numbers, and that is the average farm in UK is harvesting 120 bushels of wheat, or about 69% of the potential. In Ontario, we're harvesting around 77 bushels, only 44% of the bushel. Talk about the difference.
Well, the difference is your climate. There's no magic solution to your issues or problems, if you call that a problem. Because you have your very cold winters where little growth or no growth happens. We get growth over the winter. And then you have this harsh summer, which is not good for wheat. It doesn't like heat. Heat has many effects on the crop, but they're all deleterious. And when I say heat, I'm talking about temperatures certainly over 30 and possibly over 25. Mm-hmm.
And actually the grain is different. As you pointed out, Ontario, we've got more ears but smaller grain.
Mm. Well, that is probably symptomatic of a shorter growing season. Mm. If we grow spring wheat in the UK, we get a crop structure not far different from what you're saying for your winter wheat. And it's just a reflection of the growing season, a shorter growing season. So you might be as long in months in terms of the growing season, but the actual period of growth is restricted because of your winter.
Mm. Now, before you came over, you were kind enough to do a little thinking about Ontario based on your own experience around the world. And you had some sort of thoughts that you shared with the group today. And I'll just run through those. And the first one, you said, if you can you provide a longer growing season? The longest growing season as possible is what Ontario needs to do.
Yes, yeah. I think you are very dependent, your final year is very dependent on getting as much energy from the sun prior to your harsh weather in grain field when it gets very hot. I think you're very dependent on putting on stem reserves in the plant that can transfer to the grain later on. And I think to do that, you've got to have as much green for as long as possible when your conditions are suitable for good growth, which means something in the autumn and then in the spring, really. So you need to do that, and just think about that when you're growing the wheat. Yeah.
What about populations? You talked about, with the shorting growing season, Ontario really needs to push populations. And an interesting point, you said that, Ontario and the UK right now, populations are pretty similar.
No, I said seed rates.
Seed
rates are very similar, because in seed rates in terms of pounds per acre are very similar. But of course you have your lighter grain. So in fact, in Ontario you are actually sowing about 30% more seeds than we are. And I've seen your seed rate experiments, that seems right. I mean, I don't think I've come with a revelation. If you've been listening to OMAFRA, you would be putting on the right seed rates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've got to push populations.
You've got to make sure you maintain those populations. And the reason you need a higher population is because you've got a compressed growing season, you get less tillering or fertile tillering. And therefore you've really got to think about that. But I say, if anybody comes over the UK and listens to our seed weight per hectare, they'll think you're doing the same. But you must remember we've got far bigger grains than you have.
Talk about nitrogen. You talked about, obviously it is critical to create that optimum canopy.
Yeah, we have a measurement for optimum canopy, and that actually matches optimum canopy to trap the sunlight, and that actually matches the amount of nitrogen you require to produce that canopy. So it's a nice little, you know, where theory meets practice. But I suspect you cannot afford, because of your limited yields, that amount of nitrogen. And it would be interesting, as I said in the talk, really to know what your optimum canopy is.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you talked to Peter Johnson, who, and that's an idea Peter wanted some things we should work on.
I think, well, it doesn't take a lot to do. What you can do, really, is to in nitrogen experiments, just do a measurement of light interception and see what level of light interception you need to optimise nitrogen. Yeah. Then you can work out what the optimum canopy should be. Right. Yeah.
Hey, speaking more on nitrogen, you mentioned split applications, or timing is critical.
I've had some questions since, and some farmers, I know they've got other crops which probably have priority, but certainly if they can split nitrogen, just the once, just 2 applications, that would be great. Put some on early, so as soon as there's a bit of growth around, the crop can take advantage of that. And then put the rest on probably growth stage 30, 31, which I think is what people are doing now anyway. But I think a 2-way split is the way to best harvest the sun in this area. And I think, particularly as many people have sowed very late this year, very critical to do.
Right. Hey, I think I'll wrap up with one more thing. And you talked about, take care with plant regulators.
I think, yes. I mean, I'm coming from the UK with a UK experience, but a lot of plant growth regulators reduce the dominance of the main stem. So when you put them on, you get more tillers. Now, in a spring where it's growthy anyway, you don't need those extra tillers, but it creates a high potential number of grain sites. Then if you have a poor finish, as we call, which is a hot, dry finish, which you typically have, you get a lot of tail corn, a lot of thin corn, and it can reduce yield. So I think you've got a climate where you've got to be cautious about plant growth regulators. I'm not saying don't use them, but you've got to think a bit more about it, because I think consistently you've got situations where these will have an effect on yield in a negative way.
Mm-hmm. A final point, and that is, you talked about the future. What's the next best thing? And for you, it really comes down to breeding.
I think so. I think the world over, wheat yields are levelling off. So we're waiting for that breakthrough. And I don't think the agronomists all over the world have tried so many combinations, haven't achieved that breakthrough. So I don't think it's there. I think we can always improve slightly with better soil care and things like that. But I think the next improvements must be breeding. And in the UK at our station, our plant breeders have created synthetic wheats, which are wheats based on the original cross that occurred 10,000 years ago, but with different individuals involved. And they've been showing very high potential yields, very significantly above what we can do with our modern wheats. So I think we are hopefully on the start of a little breakthrough on wheat, widening the genetic base and probably getting some improvement because of that.
Hey Jim, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
And I hope you enjoyed your trip, and we'll have you back.
Well, I've certainly got used to cold.